What's up, guys? Radio Geek here. A while back, it was announced that there would be a Duke Nukem collection being released for the Evercade. And not only that, but they were making a limited Atomic Edition Evercade VS console to go along with it. Right around that time, I was thinking about getting an Evercade anyway, so I figured this would be a perfect time to pick one up. After all, it came with 6 Duke Nukem games. What's not to love about that? Well, the Evercades were shipped out. I got mine in, and even though it's cool that some of these games are being made available again, let's just say that there are some things to not love. Let's get into it. All right, here's the actual box. Let's crack this thing open and see what's inside. All right, so here's what it looks like when it's all set up. You've got the console itself, which is a lot smaller than I thought it would be. You've got the cartridge bay, which has 2 separate slots for cartridges, which is nice. And here's the controller, pretty standard. Doesn't have an analog stick, but it does have a D-pad here. It's got A, B, X, and Y buttons, 4 shoulder buttons on top. This middle button here is a menu button. The cords on these controllers are way too long for their own good and can easily get tangled up if you're not careful, so keep that in mind. And then here's the games. We've got Duke Nukem 1 and 2 remastered. I'm not exactly sure what's remastered about them, but we'll find out. And then we've got Duke Nukem 3D Total Meltdown. And what's interesting about that is Total Meltdown was the name of the PlayStation port, which didn't actually call itself Duke Nukem 3D, it just called itself Duke Nukem Total Meltdown. So that'll be interesting to look at. And the second collection, we have Duke Nukem Time to Kill and Duke Nukem Land of the Babes, which are both PlayStation games that I've never played. But I did play Duke Nukem Advance, and I remember enjoying it, but I'm curious to see if it holds up. So let's check out these games. One more thing before we check out the games, I just realized this. Each collection has its own little manual with it that goes over all the stuff about all of the games in it. So you've got a manual for Duke Nukem 1 and 2, you've got a manual for Duke Nukem 3D, you've got a manual for Time to Kill, a manual for Land of the Babes, manual for Duke Nukem Advance, and I thought that was a really, really nice touch.
Let's rock.
Starting off with Duke Nukem 1, which uses a fan-made sort of source port called the Rigel engine for its smoother frame rate, widescreen support, a modernized HUD, and enhanced visuals. This is a 2D platforming shooter where your objective is to go through each level shooting up a bunch of robots, drones, alien slime things, and also the Energizer Bunny for some reason. All the while finding colored keys and access cards to unlock doors, and picking up items to increase your score, power up your weapon, and give you new abilities. Health items include beer, floor turkey, and the iconic Atomic Health, which gives you full health when you pick it up. If you shoot a floor turkey before you pick it up, you'll recover 2 hit points instead of 1, but if you shoot a can of beer, if you can grab it real quick after that, it's 10,000 points, but I'd rather just take the healing. Speaking of points, in each level, if you find the letters D, U, K, and E in order, it's a massive point bonus. There are 3 episodes in all with 10 levels per episode. The first episode takes place in a ruined city, the second episode takes place on the moon and in Dr. Proton's moon base, and the final episode takes place back on Earth but in the future. Each level features increasingly tricky platforming, lots of bad guys to shoot at, and cool stuff to find. You can also switch back and forth between the new visuals and the original DOS look and feel. And you can even go into the options menu to customize your experience, mixing and matching between new and old graphics and sounds. After I discovered this and did some playing around, I opted for a 4:3 aspect ratio with the old school DOS HUD, but kept the modern visuals and frame rate. Best of both worlds. There's also a quick save option which comes in handy. Originally you had the option to save in between levels, but this just auto saves in between levels and you can quick save whenever you want. I like that. One more thing I want to talk about for this game is the music. The original version of the game didn't have any, but for this port, they've included a soundtrack by James Paddock. There are a good chunk of covers of tracks from Duke Nukem 2 and Duke Nukem 3D here, and it definitely adds something special. Really well done stuff.
I am back. The same enhancements have been made to Duke Nukem 2, which ramps up the action to 11 even though it includes a difficulty selection. I like that. I can't remember if the DOS version had a difficulty selection, but it's nice to see here either way.
After defeating Dr. Proton from the first one, once and for all, at least until the Duke Nukem Forever expansion, Duke writes a book called Why I'm So Great, because of course he does, and then gets abducted by an alien empire who want to use his brain to conquer Earth. Your objective here is basically the same: find keys and access cards throughout the levels, shoot everything that moves, and collect cool power-ups. You can even crouch and shoot up in this one. Beer and Floor Turkey make their return, as does the Atomic Health, but sadly in this one, Atomic Health only gives you 1 hit point. I'm not a fan of that. I feel like it takes away from what was supposed to make it the item unique and special. You can find a 6-pack of beer, which gives you 6 hit points, but it's just not the same. You can also find laser weapons, flamethrowers, and rocket launchers in this game, as well as a rapid-fire power-up. Rapid fire goes away after a certain amount of time, but laser weapons, flamethrowers, and rocket launchers last until you run out of ammo for them. And instead of spelling Duke in each level this time, you're spelling Nukem. Again, massive point bonus if you find all the letters in the right order. There are 4 episodes this time around and 8 levels each, and the landscape changes not only from episode to episode, but also from level to level, making each new level a whole new visual experience. One thing I did notice that I found kind of odd was the music in this one. It uses the same soundtrack as the Evercade version of the first game instead of its own soundtrack. It's not bad, it's just unusual. I'm not sure why they felt the need to replace the music. Other than that, this is another really well-made port. If you have an Evercade, these two are really worth checking out. If not, you can buy Duke Nukem 1 and 2 from Zoom Platform for $5 each and use the Rigel engine to run them from your PC.
Let's rock.
Moving on to Duke Nukem 3D, or Total Meltdown. I was right, this is the PlayStation port. And I have no idea why they went this way. I have very little experience with the original PlayStation port, so I have no idea how this compares. Hopefully someone in the comments can shed some light on that. But speaking of this version specifically, it's not very good. The music has been replaced with some sort of techno remix thing that doesn't even loop properly. Seriously, after a while, the music will just stop. It's bad. It's real bad. There are ear-piercing audio glitches. I'm going to turn down the audio on this one so your ears don't bleed, but just take a listen. It's ugly, it's clunky, the controls aren't good. See my Duke Nukem 64 video, they're about on par with that. At least with this one, the game has a heavier auto aim, similar to Doom, where it'll just aim up or down as needed, because looking up and down just is not practical here. The Atomic Edition's 4th episode, The Birth, is not present here. Instead, there's an episode called Plug and Pray. I did not make it past the first map. There is a quick save function here, but the quick save data gets erased if you reset the console. You can also supposedly quick save through the console's menu, but loading that save back up again does nothing. I even tried quitting the game entirely and loading that save again from the main screen, but all that did was start the game normally. There's also a filter option in the game settings, so I tried that out, and this is what it looks like. I could not stand to have this on for more than 10 seconds because holy shit, that's somehow even uglier than it is normally. If they had to use a console port, the N64 port probably would have been better to use. The differences in level design alone make that port worth playing, and they could have just added tracks in like they did for the first game. Decisions definitely were made here, just not very good ones. Anyway, that wraps up the first Duke Nukem collection. On to the second. And speaking of ugly and clunky, the first game in this collection is Duke Nukem Advance. Originally for obviously the Game Boy Advance, this often gets mistaken for a port of Duke Nukem 3D, but that's not the case. This is a separate game with different levels and a different storyline, but the gameplay is pretty much the same. There's no way to look or aim up or down, but you can jump. Each level has an objective you have to complete outside of finding your standard colored keycards to progress through the level. At the start of each level, you'll have a little conversation with General Graves, and then you'll have another little conversation with him once you finish the level's objective. Weapons and enemies are similar to Duke 3D with a few minor differences like the MP5 replacing the Ripper. And one of the new enemy types is the Grey, which is basically just a really wimpy archvile. One thing that bugs me about this game is that in certain levels, a big air horn siren plays whenever you enter a new area. It can be pretty headache-inducing, especially if you're wearing headphones. And like I said, it's pretty ugly and clunky, and the Game Boy Advance definitely did not have the hardware to properly support a game like this, but at least the frame rate in this Evercade version is better than it was in the GBA. I feel like people would have liked this game more if it was released on better hardware. Oh well. I still think it's worth playing despite its flaws. And these last two games I've never actually played before, so this will be more of a first impressions than an actual review of them.
No one messes with my babes and Liz.
Duke, thank goodness you received our message.
Well, she was kinda hard to miss.
Duke, I'm Jane Biltmore, a member of the Unified Babe Resistance. I was sent here by our leader, Houston, to update you on the situation.
Why, were Dallas and Austin too busy?
Well, yes, they were actually, but that's not important now. Duke, aliens arrived here 10 years ago and exterminated the entire male population. They've since enslaved Earth's females. However, some of us managed to escape and have formed the Resistance. Now we need your help.
When will those alien bastards learn not to screw with my planet, my babes, or my vacation? You should have called me sooner.
Both released originally on the PlayStation. First up, we have Duke Nukem Land of the Babes. This is a third-person 3D action platformer that sees Duke in a world where the men have been killed and the women are being kidnapped by aliens or something. Even for Duke Nukem, it's a pretty ridiculous concept, but who plays these games for the story anyway, honestly? Right off the bat, I noticed that jumping and platforming feels kind of not great. One of the first things you have to do is jump onto this ladder in this elevator shaft, but if you hit the jump button a half second too early or too late, you'll just fall. Jumping to grab onto stuff feels pretty janky too, but this is one of those things where once you get used to how it works, it's fine, I guess. It definitely could have been better, but for an early 3D platformer game and all the jank that comes with it, it's acceptable. And if I can play through and enjoy Castlevania 64, I can play through this. Health here does use the ego system, so killing enemies does refill a few of your hit points each time, and that can be nice. There's a lock-on feature, but one thing I don't like is if you're locked onto an enemy, you can't move and shoot. I played through a couple levels here, and the overall level design feels pretty good. And once you get used to how the early 3D platforming is, and just accept that it can be pretty frustrating at times, it's a pretty fun game to play. Last up, we have Duke Nukem Time to Kill. Gameplay-wise, this feels really similar to Land of the Babes. There's no lock-on button this time around, the game opting for an auto-aim feature instead, which Land of the Babes also had, but it just felt better to use the lock-on, at least for me. Movement feels overall better. You can actually strafe at your normal movement speed, so circle strafing is more viable, but platforming feels so much worse. It's awful. I hate everything about it. Half the time the buttons just don't respond, and when they do, you end up moving too far and just falling off a ledge. This might be the worst platforming I've ever had the displeasure of dealing with. I don't even think this will be a it's fine once you get used to it situation. It's just bad, and it makes the whole game feel bad to play. Now, some of you have asked me what I think about the console itself, and outside of the games that are here in these collections, I really have no experience with it. It is USB powered and does come with its own micro USB cable, but there's no included USB to AC adapter, so you either have to supply your own or have a USB port on your power strip, which I do. It also did not come with an HDMI cable, so you have to supply your own one of those as well. And like I said before, I feel like the cords of the controllers are just way too long. The console's built-in save state function doesn't function, which is a point against it, but the console's display options are kind of nice, and I wish I would have found those out sooner so I wouldn't have recorded most of my footage with black bars on the sides. But it is what it is. And there are a few other Evercade cartridges I do have my eye on, so maybe somewhere down the road I'll pick those up and check those out as well. Anyway, let me hear your thoughts on Evercade in general, or the included Duke Nukem games, in the comments down below, and then click on one of these things. One of them is a subscribe button, the other one is another video of mine you can watch. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, hit the thumbs down if you didn't like it. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.